Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to come from the third chapter in the book of James. And in this chapter, James has plenty of words to say about words themselves. Now, words, we use them so often that we often take them for granted and lose sight of what power they wield. Words are a God-given gift to humanity, unique among the animal kingdom. We have the ability to communicate concepts expressed in words that express rational thoughts, and this renders us the superior species, but it also has a destructive as well as beneficial potential, and it is capable of being corrupted, the God-given gift, just like any other thing he gives to man. Man has a way of corrupting them invariably by dwelling on what is not of God, and the most important item of information pertaining to background context is James's position, I feel, is James's position as a bishop of Jerusalem. So as the bishop, he's ministerially minded. He has a mind for the flock and also an awareness of what being a leader entails in a church. And now there is nothing wrong with aspiring to leadership in church, any church, but the fact is that not all of us are called, and even less of us are capable of leading a church, and it really entails a certain responsibility and obligation, the consequences of which are too important to leave to those who do not have the qualifications. And the major qualification, it can be argued, is their choice of words, because the words are the weapons that we use to evangelize, convert, instruct, edify, but they also can be the weapons we use to tear down, to gossip, to slander, to make libelous claims. So we really want to bear that in mind. And in the opening verse, he reads, "Not many of you should become teachers, my brothers, knowing that we shall receive greater judgment." Now, that James is writing to a Jewish audience, and in the Jewish culture, there was nothing quite as honorable as being a teacher or a rabbi or a respected authority on the traditions of their ancestors. But he has to tame the would-be ministers in his midst from aspiring past the level that they have the competency or proficiency of, or even are aware of the entailing consequences of it. So he's quite aware that the position he holds, he'll be held accountable for how he performs in that capacity, for better or worse, and he wants to warn those who don't know what he knows, what they're getting into. "For we all stumble in much. If anyone does not stumble in word, he is a perfect man, able also to bridle the entire body." So speech requires a certain domestication of it, and it ultimately sets us apart from the wild animals, but often reduces us to an equivalent state. War is a practice that is fitted only for beasts, yet practiced none so proficiently as by men, and that leads us into the fourth chapter, which is getting a little far ahead of ourselves. But the point is that words do carry power, which can control the entire body and dictate its course, and really, they have a ripple effect beyond themselves, and they are a chain in an unending continuum of human interaction. "Look, we put bits in the mouths of horses for them to obey us, and we turn their body. Look at the ships, too. Although they are so big and are driven by strong winds, they are turned by a very small rudder whenever the pilot intends." So he's using two relatable analogies for the need to control, be it a beast to be domesticated. A horse can only be utilized for civilized purposes if it is domesticated, and a horse is far from the only wild beast that can conceivably be domesticated. And a ship is also at the mercy of controls of where human really has to cooperate and understand nature and chart the course accordingly, and so too must we with the words we speak. Now, there are certain standards, and we're going to get into that as this discourse progresses. "So too, the tongue is a little member, yet boasts greatly. See how a little fire kindles a great forest." So he's noticing that the tongue, the physical tongue, is physically insignificant. In terms of size, it's physically insignificant to the rest of the body, but it does wield a power of control over perhaps any other member. It is through the tongue that are the reflections and intentions of our hearts are communicated, and the nature and state of our minds and beings are manifest. And it can conceivably kindle a great forest. It's not, I mean, we can all relate to heated escalation of violent interactions, which are really rooted in imprudent speech. Someone said something they shouldn't have, and it triggered an adverse reaction in the recipient, who strikes out provocatively, and before you know it, the whole room is up in uproar and hands and fists. That's an extreme scenario, but the analogy is precise. And the tongue is a fire, the world of unrighteousness. Like a forest among our members, the tongue is placed, the one defiling the entire body, and lighting on fire the course of generations, rolling from the beginning, and in the end is lit on fire itself. Now, the tongue clearly has much righteous and beneficial potential, but the fact is that in most of us, they are subjected to the wayward human nature and are analogous to a forest, in that it consumes us in our entirety in terms of defilement, and it has an unending continuum. So the words we speak are a continuation of conversations intermeshed throughout previous conversations. So we build a link towards the future with the words we presently speak. For every kind of beast and bird, of reptile and creature of the sea, is tamed and has been tamed by mankind. But no man is able to tame the tongue. It is unruly, evil, filled with deadly passion. So the most dangerous beast we have to attend to is not the ones we can control, but the one we can't control. And the one we can't control is more often in the mirror than in the jungle, because it is within our capabilities to subdue all of the inferior animal species, but we cannot subdue ourselves, and this has a bad admixture in the ingredients of human society. With it we bless our Elohim and Father, and with it we curse men, who have been made in the likeness of Elohim. Now, the very fact that we were able to express coherent concepts of rational thoughts is proof that we are made in the likeness of Elohim, who gave us our rational thoughts. He is an omniscient creature, meaning all-knowing, and his infinite attributes are reflected in finite doses among us. And the same, now, comparatively few people will blaspheme, but even those who don't are inclined to curse men. So really how it goes, it dwells from the subject of the two great commandments of really loving the Father and loving thy fellow neighbor as thyself. Now, as we approach the center, the nucleus of our aspirational model for perfect love, as the nearer we approach the center, the nucleus of the source of love, the more loving we will be in our interactions with men. Out of the same mouths proceed blessings and cursings. My brother, this should not be so. He's stating an obvious fact and an unpleasant reality, and he's doing that to note the dichotomy of which the tongue can wield. So even if you praise and bless the Father all day and night, and then when you erupt at your neighbor, then you're missing the point of blessing the Father. And really, the potential is the extreme literally can't conceive of a wider scale imaginable for good and evil than what this tongue wields. It has a power beyond itself that we often overlook and often take for granted. But if we approached it with the mindfulness of the power we are wielding, then when we speak, we would choose our words accordingly and more carefully. Now, there are 3 standards that a minister must adhere to when speaking anything, and sometimes it's better not to speak than to speak at all, and they must know when to refrain from commenting, and the things they don't say are often as useful and beneficial as the things they do say. The 3 standards is it true? Is it kind? Is it necessary? It's possible to speak the truth in an unloving manner, but a minister must know how to hurt the ones he loves by convicting them gently to the path of repentance, and this requires a delicate balance in the use of words. We must express condemnation for the sin while without losing sight of the sinner, and they must receive the message that we intend as such. So it really takes a delicate discipline and careful balance and judgment of discernment to wield the appropriate power as necessary. Does the fountain send forth the sweet and the bitter from the same opening? So by our fruits, men will know how we are. So a healthy tree, analogous to a spiritually mature believer, will wield good fruits in their lives, whereas a bad tree will not produce ripe fruit. They will produce rotten fruit, and they cannot stem from the same source. So really, even though the potential is there for good and evil, we are ultimately judged according to what others hear us. Now, the people we interact with only know us by what we say to them, so we're to treat each of them on an individual basis and not fall back on the kind things that we said to someone else, but really owe it to them to say the right thing, the wise thing, and if possible, the true, the kind, and the necessary thing, because not every truth is necessary to expose and convict and condemn, but they must know when and where and how to address it. My brothers, is a fig tree able to bear olives, or a grapevine figs? So neither is a fountain to make salt in sweet water. I said much of what I could have said after this verse before it, the idea being that by the fruits that we wield, that will give evidence and witness to our current spiritual state. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let him show by his good behavior, his works in meekness and wisdom. Now, in this section of the chapter, James transitions to the contrast and dichotomy of what may be called worldly wisdom, but is really nothing of, not really strictly speaking wisdom, but what the world judges to be wisdom versus the true wisdom which comes above and can conceivably dwell within if we are submitted to the source above. But if you have bitter jealousy and self-seeking in your hearts, do not boast against and lie against the truth. So this is how we approach the truth will determine our inner spirit, our inner attitude. If we are bitter, jealous, or self-seeking, self-oriented, or selfish, then we will do a disservice to the truth that we are to present. We will ultimately lie against it in one form or another by our actions or by our words. This is not the wisdom coming down from above, but it is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. Now, the demons can produce, the adversary is an imitator, not an originator by nature. So every gift and attribute and miracle he seemingly manifests is but a corrupt imitation of the authentic source of perfection of Elohim, of whom he is merely a maligned and corrupt contaminator of the perfect model. For where jealousy and self-seeking are, there is confusion in every foul deed. So not only is jealousy and selfishness spiritually contaminating, it is also cognitively compromising and corrupting, because it produces confusion and chaos in the mind, whereas he who is devoid of these traits, jealousy and selfishness, will have a clear head and think with a clear conscience and speak clearly words of wisdom at the right pitch, at the right time, at the right level, and to the right people. But the wisdom from above is first clean, then peaceable, gentle, ready to obey, filled with compassion and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. So there's a clear dichotomy of the perfect standard as outlined of wisdom, heavenly wisdom. As Christians, we seek everything we have from above in heaven, and we seek to bring more of heaven on earth, and we pray for wisdom, and we have wisdom from the one to whom we submit, and this wisdom produces a superior quality from the carnal knowledge or worldly knowledge. This can be oriented towards the accumulation of wealth or other ambitious disciplines and competitions, but there's really the wisdom that's from above is without partiality. He addresses this more extensively in the earlier half of James. You can type in Corey Johnston, James 2:1-14, I believe, or 13. And the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. Now, waging peace is in fact more difficult than waging war. War is the easy way out. It's ultimately the it's an illusion of a shortcut, but it actually makes life trouble. And war is going to pick up right off in the 4th chapter, so stay tuned for that one. Thank you so much. Bye bye.